Hello everyone, Harley here. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that this was a very long podcast, so we've split it into two different podcasts. We're going to do one this week and we're going to do another one next week. We're talking a lot about teaching with a fellow teacher, Dan Dolman, and a previous guest, Josh Locke. Unfortunately, Simon couldn't make it to this one, but he will be back next month, don't you worry. On with the show. Hello everybody and welcome to the Unity in Music podcast. I'm joined tonight by Mr. Josh Locke and Mr. Dan Dolman.
Hello.
Unfortunately...
you got two claps. I did well there. Can you do mine again?
Josh Locke?
Yeah. That was better.
Unfortunately, Mr. Simon Goldsmith couldn't be here tonight. We had quite a few planned over the last 2 weeks and none of the podcast recordings quite happened, and so this is a little bit last minute. We don't quite know what we're doing. Everything's written
shook up, isn't he?
Very badly on a notepad, and we're probably going to spend most of the time trying to work out what it actually says because it was written by a teacher. So,
fast hand.
Yes,
fast hand, Dan.
With that in mind, we're going to spend tonight talking about teaching,
grown-up things.
Discussing all about sort of teaching music in a class environment, in a one-to-one environment, or in a one-on-your-own watching YouTube videos environment. Dan, do you want to start us off? Tell us about yourself. Who are you? Why are you here?
Why am I here?
In your own house?
Yes, because I live here. I used to do a lot of drum teaching. I did it for about 12 years. That's pretty much all I did. I lost count of how many students I taught back then. It was pretty ridiculous. And now I do classroom stuff. Secondary school, so year 7 up to 13. Music tech, that sort of thing.
Cool. So you're well adept in the teaching community.
I hope so.
Well, yeah.
The boss seems happy.
Yes.
Right.
I still have a job. Government haven't split you yet.
Not just yet. No.
And Josh, you teach as well?
Yes. Yeah, I teach at Planet Music, so it's down Martlesham Way, and it's really great because we've got lots of different rooms where we have lots of different types of teachers in there. So we'll have a great violin teacher, a great keyboards teacher, great sax teacher, and a load of really great guitarists there. So you have a nice little kind of microcosm of all the industry that we've
teaching
got around
community
it.
Of music.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So
cool.
we can all sort of. It's good for that kind of environment. Is also really good because you get lots of different contrasting opinions of the way you teach. And also, when you've got like a little separate moment when you don't have a lesson, you can just go and jam with another teacher, and you'll learn stuff when you're supposed to be teaching. So it's great.
That's one thing I say. I haven't taught for a long time, and I know a lot of people sort of around when we were at college, sort of when they finished, they're like, yeah, I'm going to sort of do private lessons and stuff like that to sort of be able to afford to get through uni or wherever they went or whatever they decided to next. But I kind of actively avoided it through fear that I would teach wrong. And it's taken me until recently to sort of go, I think I know what I'm doing enough to teach somebody else at least how I do it, know. And that's one of my always been my biggest fears of, what if you tell someone something wrong?
I remember having that fear when I first started teaching.
That's not just me then, that's right.
No, not at all. I started teaching drums when I was 19, so it was quite a what do you do?
Nowhere.
Yeah.
Just I'll do what my drum teacher did with me. It was the only recourse kind of thing.
It's such a subjective industry, isn't it? Because it's just what could be wrong for some people can be right for another person, and it's also in your own delivery, isn't it? Sort of thing. You could be teaching exactly the right thing, but you could be teaching it in the wrong way, but you don't know. It's so much to do with who you're sitting down with, and it's the way that I teach is completely different to how you'll do it nowadays. Is because you've got a big group of people and you've got to connect with all of them at once.
Which completely different one-on-one,
and that's so difficult in my mind. But I can imagine, like, after you've been doing that for so long and you've taken a break from drum teaching now, so that just seems like the norm to you now.
Yep.
And that I can imagine that just the complete differences between them. But when you're in a lesson, you can't really think about that too much, because otherwise, if you're umming and ahhing about, if you're going, because then they're doing it. Yeah, exactly, and they're going to second guess you, aren't they? Because they're just going to be like, well, this guy doesn't look like he really knows if he's sure that he should be saying this right now. So I'm not sure if I'm going to take this with a pinch of salt right now. But that's the way that learning works, isn't it? Everything should be taken with a pinch of salt, really, because you are getting transferred by the medium of another person, and sometimes they can be talking after bullshit. But that's who you are.
That's a very mature attitude, and I think most...
Nobody said that before.
I've never heard it from you before. I think most...
I'll go back to playing with my dummy now.
I think... so I'm happy. You tell me, most of your students are how old?
They range between around 8 to about 15, 16.
Yeah, so
it's a similar... Well, no, not really a similar, just a little bit younger in fact, than you do.
And when I was drum teaching, it was mainly in secondary schools, so even then. But I mean... that sort of, I'll take it with a pinch of salt. I don't know if most of the students I taught would have thought like that. I think they probably see you as like the oracle, and whether and that pressure is what makes you worry that, oh my god, they're going to believe everything I say, and what if I say it slightly wrong? And I think in a way that's even more pressure, isn't it?
So trying to feel like you're an infallible force, it's just not
they
right.
put you on that pedestal, even if it's not true.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you guys go to uni?
No, I didn't actually. I did the Open University music course.
Brilliant!
Years after, so I went straight out of.
How old were you when you started?
Teaching.
On the Open University.
Oh God, 20 something.
Early 20s.
I've lost track.
Yeah.
Mid, yeah. I mean, I'd gone to college and done just music. At BTEC National, as it was.
Which one? Suffolk
Culture Institute.
Oh right, cool.
I think they still run a version of it. I think
they do.
Changed name.
Probably what we did. We did
similar. We did a BTEC at the Suffolk New College.
Oh right, cool. Right, it might well be. Same course. Did that and went straight into teaching drums, and I did it for years. And accidentally ended up like, oh, can you take this class? Okay, sure.
That's great. That
it was kind of a bit weird, a bit backwards.
Sometimes it's the best way to go into it, to fall into it, because the way that I got into Planet music was because the previous guitar teacher left and went on to doing private teaching, and I got his old students.
Wicked.
So I've got sort of 20-30 students that I teach now, just from, they were like, okay, can you do it, can you start on Monday? And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever, and we'll just go and do it. Whereas if you're actually seeking out students, there's something could be different.
An uphill struggle.
How do you recruit children? Because it's a pretty grey area there. It's like, hi, can I take your children to my house? Oh, I'm a guitar teacher, it's fine.
Yeah. I remember it took me about 2 years to get to the point. I was working bar at the time, working behind bars as a barman, and it just made that clear.
You weren't working in bars.
It took a couple of years. No, nothing else. It took a couple of years to get to that point where I didn't need to do that anymore, and I could just teach. It took so long. So I mean, I guess if we're giving tips for people who are trying to do this, one thing I did, I wrote a letter to every single secondary school in Essex saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, some sort of CV kind of thing, which was pretty slim at the time, being like 19. But I sent it to I think it was 64 secondary schools. And a few years later, when I was trying to get the private thing a bit bigger, I did a similar sort of thing. I sent a poster to every single primary school, within like a 10-mile radius of where I wanted to base my teaching.
Just your face on it.
No.
Have you seen this man around your child?
Often seen in bars.
But do you find that it's a similar kind of process that you would do to try and get gigs?
Yeah,
where you would
absolutely.
Actually sort of be planning to... Because we were talking about this before, weren't we? When we did our last podcast together. Sometimes I said portcast, I don't think that's a thing. We did what we were talking about, how we get gigs, and you were saying that sending emails and calling people, and I was talking about White Buffalo and how we would call people and leave them a voicemail of him singing to a venue, which I thought was brilliant. But then it's kind of thing, are there grey areas involved with that, just transferring over to teaching? Like, can you, because when you're trying to recruit children, is that something completely different nowadays with our kind of very protective culture that we have now, where it's like, you really do have to be vetted and things like this? Because I've gone through degrees, obviously GCSE, but also A-level and national diploma. But in terms of actual teacher training, and stuff like this. It doesn't really go for pretty much every single music teacher I know hasn't got a PGCE or anything like this.
Well, no, why would they? I mean, if they had that, they would be a classroom teacher.
Right, yeah.
And to get that qualification, well, not to get a PGCE as such, but to get QTS, to be a qualified teacher, you have to spend a year being a classroom teacher, and you have to spend another year being a newly qualified teacher. So you've just spent 2 years in a classroom. Why would you stop and then go back to trying to build a business that you've just let go for 2 years?
So there's
no such thing as a qualified.
This takes us back to sort of what you were saying
teachers.
about
what qualifies you to.
Yeah, like in terms of like, if you're teaching right and doing exactly what you should be doing, because I don't know. Again, back to so subjective and things like this. Most of the time we're teaching from experience rather than from qualifications.
Yeah.
And obviously I've got grade 8 and grade 5 theory and all this kind of stuff. There's industry standard things. But, I come from a performance industry background and, in terms of record labels and actual running business management and things like this. But in terms of teaching, again, grey areas. Where do you get this kind of idea of what's right and what's wrong with it?
I think you've already hit on you've already mentioned one of the big answers. When I was a Perry, I found it peripatetic teacher. Go to school.
I'm learning every day.
Teach drums for a couple of hours, go away. I found that a